Hey guys, Average Joe here, and I'm back with a video to talk about dials that have too much play with the Average Joe Disc Fix Kit. In front of me here, I have two dials. One is my OEM 1090, and this is a customer's knockoff 1090. This customer contacted me and said that their dial had too much play. And I said, well, they'll all have a little bit of play. This is the kind of play that they'll have. And it's this way because I had to design these notches to fit more than just my dials. They had to fit a range of dials because I've talked about in previous videos how the manufacturing of all these dials and all the parts on the OEM dumbbells is all over the place. There's no real standard for all of the little measurements on these parts. And so when I made these discs, they had to accommodate a broad range of OEM and knockoff parts. So this is the kind of play that I would expect on the this OEM dial. That's about how much play, which is fine. This is how it is on my sets, my personal dumbbells. However, look at this one. That's massive. You know, if you look at the difference between the two, you can see that this one rotates about 3 times as much in terms of the movement between, you know, the two extremes. And so I asked him to send these dials to me. He sent all 4 of his dials because I wanted to see why. Why is his set of dials, his knockoffs, so different from all the other knockoffs and dials that I've seen in the past? So what I did was I first took the vernier calipers and I wanted to see measurement, in this case 15.89 on the large lug. Now I want you to see what happens here. I'll place this over it and you can see the movement in there. That's how much larger the OEM is than this knockoff. Now do it on the small lugs. 9.66, 9.6667. We're going to take this, place it down over, and once again, look at the movement because of the play. That means that these lugs are actually smaller than the lugs on this OEM disc. It's even worse than that. If I take this OEM dial and an OEM disc and I put them together, they fit nicely. You know, it's a good fit, but that's because this only needs to fit with this. Now let's take this OEM part and try to fit it to this knockoff. Let's say you bought this on eBay and this is an actual OEM Bowflex disc. Let's try to fit it on the knockoff dial. And what you can see here is that it can only fit 2 of the 3 lugs. It will not go flat. It will not seat flat on the disc because only 2 lugs at a time can get into these spaces. And that's because from the center here out to this is longer than on OEM, which means that these lugs are just in the wrong position. They might fit okay with the discs that came with this set, but they are not going to fit okay with these OEM discs. So anyway, this customer, he wants to be able to use my kit. Now everything else about the kit was fine. It's just the fit with his dials. And so I told him to send this to me so that I could check it out because I had never seen a set of dials with that much play in it before. I had never seen a knockoff that was that much smaller on these lugs. So he sent them to me, and I came up with a solution for removing the play in the discs. Here's one. You can actually see, I can turn this and it turns the whole unit. That's how nice and snug it is now. And here's another one. And so now that's, oops, sorry, camera's jiggling, but this is the new discs, or not new discs, but the modified discs that have virtually no play. Let me take these off and put the unmodified discs on. And you can see total difference. So what did I do in order to go from this to that? Well, what I did, let me put this aside here, is I used some 𝗣𝗦𝗙𝗢𝗓 Fix-It stick. Now you can use any epoxy putty. I happen to have this, and this is what I chose to use. It works well with metals and plastics. But let me show you how you go about doing that. First of all, let's look at the difference between an unmodified, no tweaks disc straight out of the box and this disc that has been modified. And you can see in there the epoxy putty that you don't have on the out of the box disc. And that is because, let me take this out of the way, that is because on a normal setup, when you look at these lugs and these recessed areas, these pockets, there is very little gap on the ends of the lugs to the wall of the pocket. Same here. But on these knockoffs with the strangely small lugs, there are larger gaps between the lug end right here on each end of the lug and the end wall of the recess. This area does not matter. This area does not matter. It's just here and here on each one of these recesses where there is a gap between these tiny knockoff, on this particular set, these tiny knockoff lugs and the disc fix kits that were designed for OEM and the other knockoffs that I own. So the epoxy putty is used to fill the gap. But I went a little further when I did this, because putting a little bit of putty here and a little bit of putty here is not good enough. That's not going to hold very well. It's not going to bond very well. So instead, I put putty from one end all the way around the back to the other end. Same here. From one end all the way around the back to the other end. And then that way there's more surface area here that's bonded between the putty and the metal disc. You want to have enough surface area that it gives that epoxy putty a good bond, and when it hardens, it'll be strong as aluminum and steel. So right now, this has been cured, and it is rock hard. It's ready to go, and you know that when I send this back to the customer, he'll be able to assemble his, and now he won't have any play whatsoever in his dumbbells, in his dials, I mean. So let me just show you on one that I haven't done yet. Let's take this out of here, and we're going to open up our 𝗣𝗦𝗢𝗓𝗢𝗓 packaging, and inside you'll have a tube like this, and on the end of the tube there's a sticker, and you're going to notice that there are two colors. There's a core of dark gray and there's an outer ring of light gray material, and that is the two parts that you're going to mix in order to create the putty that will harden and become this surface. So what I do is, you don't need much of this. You do not need a lot of this material. What I do is I pick just a sliver and I cut a sliver of, now this X-Acto is a little dull. I should have got one of my sharper blades, but it's what I have on hand at the moment. So what I've done is I've cut off a sliver of the 𝗚𝗚𝗙 material. I'm going to take this, replace it for now, and put this back in my tube. And now what I have here is the epoxy putty with the little plastic wrapper still on it. I'm going to take that plastic wrapper off and we'll put that aside. And now we have our two-part putty. I keep my blade, in this case an X-Acto, handy, and I also have, you can use toothpicks. I happen to have this kind of carving tool, wood carving tool, but you could use toothpicks as well. So I'm going to take this and begin kneading it. And you want to knead it pretty well. You're trying to combine these. It works in the same way that things like Bondo and resin would work. So you're combining the two parts. You have a working time of about, they say 5 minutes. It's not 5 minutes. It feels more like 2 to 3 minutes. And you're going to waste some of this. You're never going to use all of this before it hardens. So don't worry about that. You can always cut another sliver and do your next disc. But what I'm trying to do here is get this nice and combined. And once I've got it combined, now I roll out some of the putty. I cut a piece off. Very, very sticky stuff. I place it into the cavity and I use my wooden tool to press it into place. Initially, it's going to have a little bit of a tough time bonding. Initially, that bond will improve once this has dried. But don't worry about that. It's going to be imperfect at first. And you can reapply if you find that your first attempt is not enough. Don't worry about it. You can put more. So you can see I'm just trying to kind of press it in to this. Now, normally I would do all three of these together, but I'm going to just show you one for the moment. Once I've got an arc of putty in there, it doesn't have to be filled completely. Notice that it has nothing in it. I've got it all along the outer rim here. Okay, so now I'm going to take my dial, in this case it's the customer's dial, and I'm going to press this in to place. And I'm going to take it out and look at the impression that it made. Now, that's going to help guide me I'm now going to make sure that I work with that impression. I'm cleaning off, notice I'm cleaning off this metal area here, and I'm pushing the clay out to the edges of the impression made by this lug. Now I'm going to put this back in again, press in, and that's one down. We would do the same thing with these other two, okay? But I'm going to clean this up a bit. I don't need all this material here that's spilled over onto the other edges. So I take my implement and I take off whatever is not needed that's sitting on the edges beyond this recess. I don't want anything on here. I don't want anything on here. I definitely don't want anything here along this rim. And I don't want anything on the inside of this bore. So again, all I'm doing is removing excess putty that I don't need. Now, if it begins hardening, you can use your blade and remove the excess. Once again, I go back and I make sure I'm tucking the putty into the walls of the recess. Now, you're not trying to be absolutely perfect here. Your goal at the end of the day is to fill, you can actually see this is already pretty much cured, or initially cured. It will take hours for it to actually fully cure, but it's fairly hard right now. Okay, so let me just, so you can see my goal here was to once again put, I'm basically filling in from about here all the way around the back to about here. Really, I only need material here and here. The reason I put it all along the back is because that gives it more surface to bond to, so that this stays in place and doesn't come loose over time. So that's why I put much more putty than I need. Technically, I really only need to fill in here and here where there is play. So going back to this, now I can't use this. It's kind of hard to cut a thinner slice off of it to be less wasteful. So don't worry about that. You got, the stick is, I mean, that's a huge stick. You're only going to need maybe an inch by the time you're done. So now let's come here. I want to clean this off. I don't want the putty on my lugs. Okay, I only want the putty on my recesses. So let's get this cleared. Take this, put this back in, and make sure that we've got the kind of fit that we want. Now that's pretty much, that's about 90% of the way there. I could actually stop here if I wanted, and that's pretty good. That's about the same as the play on this one, that's about the same. But if you want to go further, you can do the same thing now. Take another strip of, need some more. You're going to have to, because this is cured. Take another strip, place the strip inside here, from here to here, and basically create what I've done with this one. You've got epoxy putty from here all the way around, putty here all the way around, and putty here all the way around. And make sure you clean off that excess. You don't want any putty on this inner rim. You want the surface here to be level, from here all the way over should be level with this one. This should not have a bunch of bumps and kind of debris here. It should be nice and straight all the way across. There should be no putty down in here in the bore. Make sure that if you have to, take your X-Acto or your blade and run it along here and cut it off just like I did a moment ago. Okay, so anyway, the end result is that when you're done and you put your tweaked disc on your dial, look at that. How nice is that? So this is the new fit. We started out with this, and we now have this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the last two discs. I've already done two for him. I'm going to finish the last two discs. Normally I don't do this for customers. This is something that I would help explain to you, and you would do the tweak yourself. I did it for him because I'd never seen this before. I have over 1,000 customers, and amazingly, I haven't encountered this before. Not with that crazy amount of play. That's a lot more play than I've ever seen. So anyway, if you install your Average Joe Disc Fix kit and you notice that it has a lot of play, not a little bit. This is the normal amount of play that I would expect on my own personal set. This is the normal amount. This is a lot more than I would expect. So if this is your situation, then I would recommend that you go pick up some epoxy putty, whatever brand works for you. This stuff works great. And follow this process that I outlined in the video, and you will end up with discs, disc A. It's disc A that we're working with here. You will end up with a disc A that is a nice, tight fit. Okay, so hey, I hope this helped you guys that have more play than you'd like in your discs, especially if you have these kind of unusual knockoffs that they're just not even remotely close to OEM in dimension. But hopefully you found that helpful. If you have any questions, you can always write to me, and I'll try to get to your questions as quickly as I can. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you have a great evening, and I will see you guys in the next video.